I had another video planned for today, but I got really sick on Thursday morning and I'm still in pretty bad shape right now actually, so I'll save that video for another time and talk to you guys about Radiant Historia instead, since I've been playing that game like crazy while I languished in bed for the past 4 days. A lot of people have been asking me for an update on my video on the Alliance Alive. Are you still playing it? Do you still recommend it? That sort of thing. I have played it a bit further, yes, and I recently unlocked this glider that is freaking awesome, and it only makes me love the world map exploration even more. However, when it came down with this flu, I was planning on playing it a lot more so that I could update you guys with some of my thoughts. But I also picked up Radiant Historia, Perfect Chronology, and told myself I was only going to play for an hour before switching over to the Alliance Live again. 4 days later, I've only played Radiant Historia that entire time, and it has completely recaptured me just like it did when I played it for the first time back in 2011. So for those of you who haven't played it, I want to let you know why this is a top 5 game of all time for me. For starters, I love the tone, the writing, and the pace and delivery of the story. I remember when I played this game for the first time, I thought it was really slow in the beginning, but now that I've played games like Persona 4, it feels lightning fast in comparison. More than that though, I'm a huge fan of the tone it's trying to hit. I get a lot of questions from viewers in the comments about my thoughts on various games. What do you think of Persona? What do you think of Trails in the Sky or Trails of Cold Steel? What do you think of Disgaea? What do you think of Xenoblade 2? If you want to give yourself an idea of the kinds of stories that I like in my JRPGs, and especially the kind of tone that I like, Radiant Historia is basically the standard to go by. It asks you to take it seriously and properly executes in order to make you do so. It doesn't undermine itself with malplaced juvenile humor, but it does pepper in good, lighthearted moments where the characters joke around with one another and relieve tension. It feels so natural though, and none of it is excessive. On the other hand, it has a very interesting story that consistently hits you with new information at the right pace to draw you in and keep you invested. I really don't want to spoil the story too much, so I'll just briefly summarize by saying that the story takes place in the midst of a war between two nations, Alistel and Grenorg. The player takes control of Stock, a swordsman who works for the Special Intelligence branch of the Alistel army, who's given a book called the White Chronicle by his superior Heiss. With the White Chronicle, you can travel back in time to certain key important moments to change your decisions and alter history. There's an important decision at the beginning of the game that sort of splits the story into two timelines, the standard history and the alternate history. And essentially, what you have to do is progress through one or the other until you hit a roadblock that makes completing your mission impossible, then jump back to the other timeline in order to gather information or learn new skills that'll make it possible to return to the other history and continue moving forward. As an example of this, here I was trying to pass a blockade to get into Grenorg with a traveling performance troupe. When the guard stopped me and asked to see my act, I had nothing to show him at the time. However, by jumping over to the other timeline, where I was in a completely different place with different characters, I learned sword dancing from Keel, a skill which I could then take back to the standard timeline and use to get past the blockade. While doing this, you uncover conspiracies, learn the true nature of the desertification that's destroying the world, and meet a lot of great characters along the way. There are also a ton of choose-your-own-adventure style bad endings to unlock, and lots of great side quests, a number of which are required for the game's true ending. Normally, hearing that a game has a true ending really bugs me because it often means that if you miss something important, you'll have to start all over again in order to unlock it. Here, with the time-traveling mechanic, Radiant Historia makes it super easy and quick to jump back to do those things you missed, and organizes everything for you in a way that makes it really convenient to do so. Many of you are aware of how many save files I create when I play RPGs in order to give myself the ability to go back to any point in the story I want and make sure that I didn't miss anything. This game totally erases the need to do that because it's structured through its time-traveling mechanic to allow you to do so already. When it comes to accessibility and going for a 100% run, there isn't any game I've ever played that does it as well as Radiant Historia. It's not even close. One thing I especially love about the story, though, is the amount of screen time that villains get, and how the writers have humanized them. They haven't set up a black and white world here where Alistel is good and Grenoric is evil. There are good and bad people in both nations, those who want what's best and those who selfishly scheme on both sides. Motivations are really well established and the characters are super believable. It's excellent stuff, providing a lot of nuance that you don't often see in more traditional fantasy JRPGs like this. It's just really, really good, and it hits all the right notes for my personal taste. On top of this, the battle mechanics are amazing. Again, for those who wonder what I might think about X or Y game, this is a pretty good standard to measure by. What I love about it is that it's simple but deep. And what I mean by that is that you don't need 20 hours worth of tutorials to explain all the ancillary, totally unnecessary systems within systems for the sake of feeling complex. In this game, you understand the battle system within an hour, probably less than that to be honest, and it continues to deepen as you play due to the grid system on which it's based. Every battle takes place on a 3x3 grid, where enemies attack you in various formations. Your job is to try and move the enemies around on the grid in order to get as many of them as possible onto a single space, allowing you to hit them all at once with your attacks and magic. That's easier said than done though, considering that this game is truly turn-based with a specified turn order. Basically, what you want to do is change the turn order, or switch with enemies down the line, in order to give your characters a lot of actions in a row. In doing so, you can build these huge combos that allow you to wipe the floor in a single chain of attacks. However, when you change the order, you leave yourself vulnerable, turning the characters red and leaving them susceptible to critical hits. So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game with some risk-reward thrown in. There's a lot of strategy to it, and it's really fun. The exploration is great too, because there's a lot of areas you can't reach at first due to the fact that you haven't learned the right abilities yet, but down the line, once you've learned the right abilities, you can come back and gain access to treasures that were previously unavailable. Of course, as usual, I love it when you can see the enemies on the field maps and choose to avoid them or engage them at your leisure. And here you can actually hit and stun them before engaging to give yourself a chance at a preemptive attack. Another thing I really like about this game is that it has a pretty heavy emphasis on item management. A lot of JRPGs these days will heal the party and restore MP automatically after every battle, which makes the use of items in dungeons totally obsolete. If you survive during combat, you just get healed up anyway, so there's no point unless you're desperate during a fight and have to heal immediately, but usually you have spells for that, so it makes items kind of pointless. Radiant Historia makes item management, as well as MP management for that matter, a big factor, where you feel like you're going to run out if you aren't careful. On top of this, mana crystals, which are this game's version of tents, are really hard to come by and extremely expensive, so generally, you won't get a full heal at save points. This is great because it makes the choice to avoid fights at certain points a totally legitimate strategy to get through a dungeon. In addition to this, the music is spectacular, and of course it is, since it was composed by Yoko Shimomura. It is a pretty short soundtrack though, at only 25 tracks, which leads to a lot of repetition, which I find pretty unfortunate. However, the music we do have is amazing, and helps establish that tone I talked about earlier. For those who played the original game and are wondering what's different in this version, they changed all of the character portraits, which I was kinda disappointed about. I thought the art style of the DS version was a lot more original, and seeing these new portraits was weird at first, especially when they completely changed the look of a character like Erika. However, there are a couple of characters who I think look better this way, so when it's all said and done, it's not a deal breaker by any means. The really stupid thing though, is that they offer the original character art in a DLC pack for $249, which is an absolute dick move. There's no reason why they couldn't have put this in for free. They also added voice acting, which really scared me at first because I'm pretty picky with voice work in JRPGs, but I've been pleasantly surprised so far. Most of it is actually quite good. There are a few exceptions with characters like Hugo, but most of the voice work is actually really good. It's a little weird that they only recorded lines for the characters that have portraits though, because there will be these long conversations where your characters are speaking out loud to non-player characters that will grunt or only say a single word, then nothing, as the player will have to read the rest of what they're saying in response. They also added a third timeline though, called Possible History, which is just a sequence of events with a new character for whom you collect artifacts. It's kinda cool, I guess. You know, it's just added content for those who have already played the original in any case. Something else that you'll probably want to know is that character progression is locked, so you earn abilities for the characters in a fixed linear progression as you level up. There's no customizing in that area at all. I am totally fine with that, but for those of you who want a job class or heavy character customization, you're not gonna find that here. Anyways, this game is absolutely outstanding, and I thought I'd share a little bit about it with you guys today. It was funny to me because just a couple of weeks ago I talked about how much I was blown away by the Alliance Alive, and now I've totally set that game aside to replay a game I've already beaten before. But that's just a testament, honestly, to how good this game really is. If you haven't played this, I could not recommend it more. The story is amazing, the battle mechanics are a lot of fun, and for guys like me who grew up with 16 and 32-bit JRPGs, it really harkens back to that era and understands what those old classics did right. Give it a shot if you haven't. Atlas is the new king of the hill with JRPGs. I'll see you guys on Wednesday for the next podcast. Have a good day.